Welcome back to My Bake Escape. It is literally days away from fall, and I am so excited to honor this great season that is my favorite. I decided to make a Mexican sweetbread that is one of my favorites, but with a fall twist. These are my pumpkin conchas. For the full recipe, be sure to visit mybakeescape.com. Also, if you want to see what I'm doing day to day, be sure to follow me on Instagram and TikTok at mybakeescape. This recipe calls for an enriched yeasted dough, so it will need some butter and eggs, and I'm adding a little bit of pumpkin puree. To get started, you want to bloom the yeast by adding it to milk that has been warmed to 105 to 110 degrees Fahrenheit. Then I added a little bit of sugar, the yeast, give it a mix, and set it aside for 10 minutes. While the yeast blooms, I went ahead and worked on the dough ingredients, starting with the dry ingredients. To the flour, I added cloves, ground cinnamon, a little bit of salt, and I happen to have fresh nutmeg on hand. If you don't have this, you can use a little bit of ground nutmeg, but I really do like to use the fresh stuff. It just adds a lot more flavor. So I grate just a little bit over the flour using this microplane. Mix all of these ingredients together. Next step is to work on the wet ingredients. So to the sugar, I add 2 eggs. And I'm doing this whole recipe by hand because I know that a lot of people don't have the same equipment as me, but everybody can find some bowls and a whisk and use their hands to make things, right? So to the eggs and sugar, I add some vanilla extract, that fresh pumpkin puree. This is just pumpkin puree. It's not the pumpkin pie mix. It's Libby's fresh pumpkin puree. It's my favorite fall ingredient. Mix that until it's well incorporated. By now the yeast should be done, so we're going to go ahead and complete this recipe by adding the butter to the flour mixture. So I'm using a spatula to kind of cut in the butter, and it's taking forever, so I decided to use my hands. Your hands are the best tools in the kitchen, and I don't know, there's something about squeezing butter between your fingers and getting that all mushed in there. It's fun. So once the butter's incorporated, next step is to add the sugar pumpkin mixture followed by the yeast mixture. You'll see that it's kind of foamed up there, and that means it's activated and it's going to work beautifully in this recipe. Now that everything is in the bowl, I use a large spatula to mix this all together. This dough is going to be quite wet, and it will need a little bit more flour. I would say about 1/3 cup of flour. I place that in a shaker so that I can easily use it to sprinkle over my dough and the surface that I work on. If you notice, there were some pieces of butter not fully incorporated into the dough. I didn't worry about it because while I knead the dough, that butter will get fully incorporated and it'll turn out just fine. So you see how moist this dough is. It will need some more flour, but you want to be careful when adding flour to your dough. If you add too much, it could definitely change the texture and the rise. It'll make it very dense. So I add a little bit at a time, and this little sprinkler cup is such a great tool for this. So to knead the dough, I just kind of bring everything together, roll it around, tuck it in, just to make sure that it isn't too sticky and I can actually start working the dough. Throughout this process, I do lift the dough and add a little bit more flour to the bottom of my surface because it does stick. And you're going to go ahead and knead this until it is smooth and doesn't stick so much. So right here, it is still sticking to my hand and to the board a little bit, so it needs a little bit more kneading. And this looks like it's just about done. It's not sticking to the board anymore. It's not sticking to my hand. It's nice and smooth and soft. I like to lightly grease the bowl that I'm going to let this rise in. So use a little bit of non-stick cooking spray, place the dough inside of the bowl, sprayed it on top as well because I'm going to cover this with plastic wrap, and if I don't spray the top, the dough will stick to the plastic wrap. So covered with plastic wrap, and I placed this in my oven for about 2 hours. I place it in my oven because it is a draft-free space and it can rise beautifully in that environment. While the dough rises, I'm going to go ahead and work on the sugar topping, which is my favorite. It's so delicious. So the sugar topping consists of flour and powdered sugar, and I also flavor this with those fall spices, so some ground cloves, ground cinnamon, a little bit of salt. I always add salt to my sweet treats because it brings out the flavor. A little bit more of that fresh ground nutmeg. Mix this all together. Now this next part can be pretty messy, especially because I like to use my hands. So I went ahead and put some gloves on, and I placed an entire stick of room temperature butter into this flour sugar mixture. And I just started to incorporate it into the mixture. It's really messy, but eventually it will all come together into a nice ball of dough. It has the consistency of Play-Doh, and so the next step is to color it. And so for my pumpkin conchas, I need 2 colors. I'm going to do the majority of this dough is going to be a vibrant bright orange, and then that little piece that I put to the side is going to be the green stem. So I used some emerald green food coloring and just work the color into the dough until it's evenly colored that beautiful vibrant green. Next, I use this orange gel color, and using a toothpick, I carefully scoop out a nice blob of the orange. I want a lot of this because I want it to be a nice vibrant orange color. And I just start incorporating the color into the dough, mixing by hand, also kneading against my work surface just to make sure that the color is fully incorporated. I realized I didn't put nearly enough, so I added another big blob of orange and continued to incorporate this into the dough. This is messy and it will get all over, but it is washable. It will come right off. But I do like to use gloves because it does kind of stain your hand for a couple of days. So after working the dough for a few minutes, you can see that the orange is fully incorporated and that it is a beautiful, vibrant color. So next step is to wrap this up in plastic wrap and set aside until I need it. Wrapping this up will prevent it from drying out, so I highly suggest that you do wrap both pieces up in plastic. All right, so the dough has rested and risen for 2 hours, and look at how beautiful it looks. It has doubled in size, and it is glossy and soft. Oh, it turned out perfectly. Look at all those specks of the spices in there, and it has a nice little orange tint from that pumpkin. Next step is to pour this out on a lightly floured surface, and what I like to do is measure out the portions that will make each concha. So what I ended up doing was cutting these into pieces and weighing them out, and I decided that 5 ounces was going to be the weight I wanted, which for this recipe gave me 7. I know that's like an odd number, but if you want an even 8, then you would just have to measure out, the balls to be a little bit smaller so that you can get 8. The next step is to bring the dough together into a ball, and then I use my hand to cup the dough to just kind of move it around, smooth it out, really tucking in those edges. And then I continue to do this to every other piece. As I cup the dough and roll it around like that in my hand, the palm of my hand is pressing down slightly, which makes the bottom smooth and comes together pretty well. Once all of the dough balls are shaped, I went ahead and worked on the sugar topping. So I measured this out. It was 314 grams, and I knew I needed 7 portions. And so I just did the math and made sure that I had as evenly as possible 7 pieces of this sugar topping. I really love my kitchen scale. I have 2 of them, and they are Such a great tool. I highly recommend that you invest in one. They're not very expensive and they're really great, especially if you're using my recipes, because I do give all of my measurements in grams and cups. So if you have a food scale, you can go ahead and follow the grams measurements for my recipes. Once I've portioned out all of the sugar topping, I gently roll each one up into a round ball and set it to the side. Now to roll these out, I use 2 pieces of plastic wrap. It is quite sticky and it will tear easily, so putting it between 2 pieces of plastic wrap while I roll it out was the best method to ensure that I can get a nice big piece of this sugar topping to place on top of the ball of dough. You want to roll the sugar topping out so that it is large enough to cover the top as well as the sides of the ball of dough. You see how easily it tears. You want to be gentle and you want to just kind of tuck all of that sugar topping around and underneath the ball of dough using your fingers, turning it gently, and just tuck, tuck, tuck until it is as best as you can get it wrapped around the entire ball of dough. Now to get that cute little cut, the cute design on top, I do have a Concha cutter. I got this on Etsy and I will be sure to put the link in the description below. The first time I pressed down, it didn't really go through very well. I was trying to be gentle, but I realized you got to just push down pretty hard to get that indentation, that shape cut into it. So this is the first one, and as I continue to work, they did get a lot better. Place the ball of dough on top of a parchment lined cookie sheet and set to the side while you work on the rest of them. I love baking. I'm sure if you follow me for a while, you can tell that I really enjoy baking. I bake a couple of times a week, and I've always enjoyed baking. I have fond memories of being in the kitchen with my mom when I was little and making empanadas with my grandma. Just lots of great memories around baking, and it is actually quite therapeutic for me too to get into the kitchen, focus on something that I can have complete control of, and at the end of it, I have a delicious treat to enjoy, right? It's just such a wonderful hobby, and if you're following me, if you've subscribed to my channel, I feel that we are similar in our enjoyment of baking. Leave a comment below. Let me know what it is about baking that you enjoy the most. Now that I have all of the orange sugar topping placed on top of the balls of dough, it's time to work on the green little stems. So I took a little piece of the green dough and just kind of worked it between my fingers and shaped it into a little stem and placed it not on the edge, more on the top of the dough, because I want to make sure that it stays on there not only while it rises again, but while it bakes. So I kind of press down a little bit firmly to make sure that it is adhering to that orange sugar dough. These are going to rise again for another 45 minutes to an hour. I like to cover the entire cookie sheet with plastic wrap and place this back in my oven. Like I said, for about 45 minutes. It really depends on how warm it is in your kitchen. So I place these in the oven, and I actually have a proof setting on my oven, and so I set that to proofing and set it for 45 minutes. And after they rose for the second time, you can see that they did puff up slightly. The sugar topping has cracked a little bit because it's been pushed out with the dough rising underneath. These look so cute, and they're not even baked yet. So I place these in a 320 degree oven for about 18 to 22 minutes, depending on the size of the conchas. The bake time will vary, so I just bake them until they are puffed up and golden brown around the bottom edges. You want to take them from the oven and let them cool on the baking sheet for about 10 minutes before transferring them to a cooling rack. I know that this recipe can seem a little intimidating. It has a lot of steps and there is some wait time, but if you follow the directions and you're patient, you can definitely make these. They are worth the try. They turned out really good. Not only are they adorable, but they're very delicious. They baked pretty well all over. And when you open the inside, you can see that they are a light orange color from that pumpkin. You can see specks of spices throughout, and the dough is soft and pillowy and just perfectly flavored. They're not too sweet. They have a hint of that pumpkin and the spice, and they are so soft and delicious. These would be amazing with a cup of coffee or even some Mexican hot chocolate. I hope you give this recipe a try soon. If you do, please let me know in the comments what you thought of it. I want to take some time to appreciate all of you who have subscribed to my channel. I can't believe I have over 700 people following me. This is just so unbelievable. I appreciate all of your support. And for those of you who haven't subscribed yet, feel free to do so. Hit that like button. And as always, have a sweet day.